Welcome in, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement. Your host, Loren Sherman, is a certified financial planner and owner of the flat fee firm Integrity Wealth Management. He curates each episode with you in mind. Whether a work-optional lifestyle is on the horizon or you're already there, this show has something for you. With that, listen in, and I hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome in to another Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement. Of course, I am your host, Loren Sherman, and I'm excited to share this conversation with estate planning attorney, Dr. Eddie Thompson. Eddie is the type of person who has such a warm personality. He's the type of guy that when you talk with him, you feel like you've known him forever. So I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think you will too. He brings some humor to the estate planning conversation, which admittedly can be a bit of a dry topic depending on how we approach it. He also tells stories, uses some analogies that we can all understand, which provides clarity to that estate planning conversation that otherwise can be rather complex. But before we jump right in, let me give a snippet of Eddie's background. Eddie founded Thompson Associates, and as CEO, he provides leadership to over 35 seasoned estate planners. He has planned thousands of estates and generated billions of dollars for charities during his 40-plus years working with nonprofits. Eddie speaks to his peers from coast to coast on the topic of estate planning. He serves as the chair of the board of directors for the Charitable Estate Planning Institute, and he's been the recipient of many honors and awards throughout his career. Eddie truly is the top of his class, and I'm really grateful that he was generous enough to share some of his time and his wisdom with us today. Rather than interrupt the flow of this conversation, I decided to release this one in one episode instead of two, so you can break this one up into a couple of listens if needed, but I think you'll find that Eddie keeps things engaging and you may not want to hit pause. So without further ado, let's dive right into my conversation with Dr. Eddie Thompson. With me today on the Healthy, Wealthy, Wise podcast is Dr. Eddie Thompson, I guess known as Eddie. We'll call you that for the show today. And Eddie, I really appreciate you joining me today to have this conversation.
Happy to do it. Looking forward to the discussion.
And right before we hit record, you mentioned that you are calling in from Nashville, but you are frequently up here in Iowa. Visiting us in Des Moines, just staying a little bit out of some of the winter weather that we get a little bit more harsh up here.
Yeah, I try to avoid that, but it doesn't seem to work out. I don't know how you handle winter.
I'm with you. I think, it really makes you appreciate when spring gets here, but yeah. I think about that every year of, gosh, maybe we shouldn't spend winter here every year.
My first experience was I landed February the 2nd in Iowa. And you can tell I don't have a whole lot of hair. And I stepped out of the airport, the doors opened, and snow was doing this. And I had no hat or gloves. And I thought, what in the world have I gotten into?
Yeah, exactly.
But I love the people in Iowa. I love working in Iowa.
Yeah, those harsh winters makes for tough people, I suppose. And good salt of the earth people here in Iowa.
Absolutely.
Well, we won't have to go over too much of your background, but if you don't mind, if you could share just a little bit of your background, and then, of course, explain what you do. I guess I haven't given much of a lead in here. So if you can tell our audience what you do, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, I've been doing this since 1980. I'm an estate planner. We're unique in that we don't sell products, we don't manage money, and we don't draft documents. There's about 50 of us in our firm. I don't know how many attorneys, 30 or 40 attorneys, CPAs. I did my doctorate at Vanderbilt before you were probably born. I've been doing this a long time. I love it. I love what I do. Most important thing is I'm a husband of 53 years. But even not maybe more important than that, but I'm a grandfather too. I love being a grandfather. Okay. And I have found my passion in life, which is helping people plan their estate, to kind of look above what's normally done. Most of the time you see estate planning, it's bypass planning. how to reduce taxes, that type of thing. We take it to a different level. The vast majority of people we work with already have an estate plan. We take another look at it. We look for three things. One, do they have enough to live on the rest of their life? It kind of falls in your area. We
Sure.
confirm that, however. Second, what's the smartest way to give to heirs in such a way as maybe it doesn't go to the evil son-in-law, or if you've got a child with special needs or a grandchild with addiction. We get into all those type of things. So when all is said and done, you're able to sit down with your attorney, your investment advisor, your trust officer saying, this is what we want to do. But more importantly, here's why we want to do it. So maybe a better nomenclature from planner is educator. And I started the company a little over 30 years ago. I want to start a company just replete with integrity, no games, no gimmicks, no tricks. I thought if I could really know tax law, sit down with folks and say, what do you want to do? And then let me show them how to do it.
Sure. So the thought process behind not actually constructing the documents, it's like you're putting all of the hard work and the thought behind creating those documents, and then the actual creation of them is just kind of the getting the correct paperwork signed, right?
Right. If an attorney's never drafted what we're recommending, which is not unusual, especially on some of the bigger estates we work on, we'll prepare the language for the attorney, but it's attorney
Oh,
to
interesting.
attorney. They're the actual drafting attorney. We love that for a couple of reasons. One, I think it helps educate the legal community across the board. In addition to what we do as far as planning, we do probably 50 to 60 CLE a year where we train attorneys in various techniques. And so we started historically as backroom technicians to law firms. So if a law firm
Okay.
got involved in something that was more complex than they're used to doing, they'd engage us. We'd come in and do the work. And we never actually met with the planning client, which was frankly boring way to do it. I love meeting with different types of people and hearing their experience. So when it all comes down to everybody that works in our firm had to take 13 tests on tax law and
Oh, wow.
make 100 on all 13.
Wow.
You can't,
So you have a high bar.
yeah. Well, we're in an area in which there's often litigation
Yeah.
where the son-in-law didn't get what he thought he deserved. And so when that happens, we're going to win that case 100% of the time.
Right. So would you say the clientele that you're serving, is it always more complex cases, or is that just the majority of them? Or how would you answer that question? How does that break down?
Well, the smallest estate I worked on this year was 270,000. The largest was 1.1 billion. So
Okay.
we run the whole gamut. We really have two divisions in our company. We have a division that works like 30 million and under, and then a division that works 30 million and above. Fees are very different. How we approach is very different. That most of our clients, however, are like hospitals, like Blank Children's, Methodist, Lutheran, MD Anderson. You know, you start naming all these charities, universities. Uh,
Okay.
but when we work with individuals, we're engaged by that individual, and that's usually the really big estates. So we take
Okay.
the techniques that are used typically by the very wealthy and apply them to people who have wealth, but maybe not a 1.1 billion.
Sure. Interesting. So I think everybody, for the most part, a lot of people have heard of a simple will, a trust, power of attorney, maybe healthcare directive. You mentioned that sometimes your advice is to construct something that maybe the attorney's never even done before. Can you kind of scratch at that just a little bit more of what, maybe a peek behind the curtain of what kind of strategies you're talking about?
Oh my. Well, this
Is that
this
a
could
whole
go
can
for
of
this
worms?
could go for a while, but here's a good example. We did one recently in Iowa. It was a nice estate. We recommended a testamentary charitable remainder unit trust with a four-tier testamentary lead trust. And so a lot of attorneys have never drafted a lead trust. May have drafted some remainder trust, but in that situation where the language is particular, it needs to be exact, that we'll draft that part of the document, we'll send it to the attorney. and the attorney can include it in their draft. So,
Okay.
uh, but we do other things too. Not every estate is $1 billion. And if you let me guess, I'm purely guessing this. I hope it's okay.
Sure.
I would say that probably 80% of the plans we do are somewhere around a million to the under the taxable, maybe 30 million. That may even be 90% of what we do.
Okay.
And then we do some bigger ones as well. But
Okay.
our focus is not so much the size of the estate as the type of assets in the estate. That's far more like the last big one I did, he had 172 LLCs.
Oh boy.
Well, you can guess how much work that is. And trying to get cost basis on 172 LLCs alone is a challenge because they don't know.
Sounds like a serial entrepreneur or something.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
we,
that's
we
interesting.
we get a lot of those, and not all are wealthy.
Sure. Yeah, they keep creating because the
Yeah,
previous one didn't work out, maybe.
exactly right. It takes like the fourth or fifth attempt often to be really successful at it.
Sure. So estate planning documents, I'm kind of curious. Sometimes people say about maybe their home or auto insurance, I don't know how good it is until I have to use it. Well, the estate planning documents, you might not be around to see how good it is. Is that sometimes what you see of that? Hopefully you're catching quote unquote mistakes before that finality, but how often do you see that where it's like the heirs are working through everything and thinking, gosh, I wish we would have done this a little different.
Okay, this may come off as being critical. I don't mean for it to be, but it is factual. We see about a 90% error rate.
Wow.
Uh, so what we do is a little bit different in that we probate in advance.
Okay.
So in theory, you shouldn't have to go through probate. And for most people, and you would be an expert on this part of it, the vast majority of people have contracts. And wherever you have a contract where you list a beneficiary or a successor beneficiary, that voids probate. Your investments, I'm sure. If someone has life insurance or stock or whatever where they've listed money, it doesn't really matter. If you have a
Yeah.
contractual agreement where you list a beneficiary, you bypass probate.
Hmm.
So we're not real big on pushing trusts unless they really make sense. But
Okay.
the advantage of a trust, if it's fully funded with the right assets, you can avoid probate. I mean,
Hmm.
you'll still have a pour over will, but the reality is with good planning, you should really limit the amount of time spent in probate. And I would suggest this too, because I think it's important. If you go through probate, it's going to take 9 to 18 months. If you've done a good job planning, it ought to take 1 to 5 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So let's just think about it. If one of your clients dies and they've listed their beneficiaries, all they got to do is show a death certificate, right?
Sure.
And how quickly do you get death certificates is how long it takes to transfer the asset. So
Right.
most people do trust and other contractual agreements for speed. It does avoid probate, but the real reason they do it, they want to get the farm into the hands of their children as quickly as possible.
Sure.
And it's true of all businesses, not just farming.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. 90% is a little shocking. Is it? So one of my follow-up questions was, where does planning go wrong? So maybe you can dig into that a little bit more of that 90%. Are there some things you're seeing that are really common mistakes or maybe more costly mistakes?
Yes. The answer to that,
Both.
the answer is yes. I think the most frequent mistake we see is lack of thorough planning. And there's this disconnect sometimes between investment advisors, attorneys, their accountant. It's like they're siloed, where the best plans, the most effective plans, they work as a team, which is really hard to do.
Hmm.
You know that in your business. I mean, I don't know how much time you spend with your clients, attorneys, or accountants, But ideally, the best plan is where everyone's brought together. Now, where do we see the mistakes? Oh my. Wow. I mean, I've got so many things running through my mind right now. Well, let's just take, for example, a revocable living trust that's not funded. We see this a
Right.
lot in Iowa,
Right.
where people create trust and maybe they have one asset in it, where they don't have everything that needs to be in it. We often find on designation forms, they do the first generation, but not the second. So they have the
Okay.
primary beneficiary, but not the secondary beneficiary.
Yeah.
So when we plan, we want to see all the beneficiary forms
Okay.
because most people keep their wealth where beneficiary forms are really important.
Yeah. And if you don't list a secondary beneficiary and that person predeceased you, it defaults back into the probate process, correct?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And so again, what you're trying to avoid by listing a beneficiary may not be thorough enough. So we're going to spend some time looking at everybody's beneficiary forms. We're going to make sure they're filled out and are thorough. You can accomplish that too by rolling all these contractual agreements into a trust. So that's another way to do it. We don't always push trust. Uh, we do probably more testamentary trust than revocable living trust.
Okay.
It just purely depends. So for every estate we work on, I'll do probably 300 estates this year. It's a typical year, and you know the vast majority of them have all they have is bypass planning, and that's wonderful, but it's not enough. That's a
Hmm.
good first step.
What is that when you say it's not enough? What is it missing the mark at?
Well, let's just take for example how to benefit heirs. I don't know if you have children or their age. We often think we need to take care of our children when they're younger, but there's more opportunity for conflict when they're older.
Hmm.
So what we try to do is avoid all the problems where there's
Hmm.
no contest, where the evil son-in-law can't stick his nose under the tent and get involved in it. Another good example of that is where Cheryl and I have been very fortunate. Uh, Cheryl's my best friend. I will probably predecease her 84% of the time. Husbands go first. Cheryl's going to have accumulated some wealth. She's cute. She's fun. She's going to have some wealth, and she's going to have a line wanting to marry her.
Yeah, I was thinking, I think I know where this is going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure she'll do a great job picking the number two. She did a great job picking number one from my perspective. But I don't want Mr. Two to have access of what we built.
Sure.
So often we'll do a marital trust where we lock up the assets to be spent as we wished for it to happen. Another way to do it is if we had three buckets of money for our heirs. And two statistics that are fascinating: 36% of baby boomers do not plan to leave any inheritance to their heirs. Now, think
What was
about
that?
that.
36%?
36%.
Okay.
Think about that for a second. That's changed in my career. This has been happening the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I
But it's
feel like that's become a little more popular. A handful of episodes ago, I interviewed someone that wrote about the book Die with Zero, and that concept has kind of become a little bit more popular, perhaps.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And then 47% don't plan to leave the majority of their estate to their heirs. Now, Cheryl and I are in the 36%. Everything we have when we're gone is going to charity. So
Okay.
why
So
is that?
it's not die with zero. It's we
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
we want our wealth to have a larger impact outside of just the family.
yeah. Because my children are all three successful. They're all
Sure.
in their 40s. They're living in bigger houses than we live in. They drive nicer cars, and they take much nicer vacations than Cheryl and I do. Uh,
Yeah.
but they're living within their means. I mean, they're not extravagant. They don't need anything from us.
Yeah.
What are we going to do for them? And then we look around at people like blank that there are people that have needs. And I want some of what we built if not all of what we built to help other people who are really struggling. And Cheryl and I are
Yeah.
very, very blessed.
Yeah,
So
that's admirable, I think.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask if kind of the investment advisor part of my brain clicked there and wondered, do you think of part of your portfolio then based on that time horizon instead of your own lifetime? Because sometimes as people age, they become more and more conservative with their portfolio, and perhaps not if you're thinking of the longevity in a different way.
There you go. So you're leading perfectly into my next comment.
Fair
So
enough.
we look at with heirs. This is pretty typical. You can see why investment advisors love us. In fact, most of my planning clients have been brought to me by their investment advisor.
Okay.
It's the vast majority. Some attorneys, but primarily investment advisors. So we look when we start thinking about what's the smartest way to give to heirs. So let me ask you, why do people leave money to their heirs? What's the intent?
What is the intent of leaving money to the heirs? I think probably number one, at least in my head, is that it's almost like the default that there isn't a lot of intent.
Yeah. But if whatever you
You-
decide is to help secure them, especially if they're younger, but it's also true as they're older, we want to make sure
Right.
they have enough to live on. So we look at three buckets. The first bucket is what are they going to get outright when mom and dad are gone? Well, here's a couple of other statistics. 92% of all inheritance is spent within 6 months of acquisition. Think about
That's
that.
and that's not any statistic of like number of generations passed down. That's just right out of the gate.
Right at 6 months after acquisition.
Wow.
Secondly, whatever I leave my heirs, if they were to go through a divorce, could they lose that money? Yes.
Yeah.
What if they're in a car wreck and an attorney has found out that they have acquired wealth? They'll sue them even if they know they can't win
Mm-hmm.
because they know they'll settle.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they get into financial trouble, they lose a job and can't get employment for 6 months to a year because their career is very specific. Whatever we leave our heirs outright is not secure or protected.
Mm.
So we look at two other buckets. One bucket we set aside, and it provides annual income to our heirs for a period of time, let's say until the youngest reaches 50. And
Okay.
its purpose is to provide annual income. The third bucket is money set aside to take care of a lump sum payment when there's a triggering event. A triggering event might be they're going to buy a house or they get a medical emergency or a grandchild goes to college. For Cheryl and I, for example, when our granddaughters turn 16, we're going to buy them a good car.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want them to be in a car that breaks down on the way
Right.
home. And I guess I should think about my grandsons, but their dads played football in college. They're going to be fine. No one's going to take them on. And then now, if these last two buckets, if there's a third party administrator, there's enormous financial security with that. The
Yeah.
chances of losing that in litigation are nil.
Okay.
So we look at using all three buckets. How much do you want to leave them outright? It might be 50,000, it might be 25,000, whatever it is. And these other two buckets are set aside, and that's going to secure their future. They may
Mm-hmm.
spend or lose this first bucket. That second, third bucket is going to be there. And it's going to be another 20 or 30 years after mom and dad are gone. So you can see why investment advisors like us. I
Sure.
trust them because they're going to manage that money another 20 or 30 years, which your clients love and respect you, don't they?
Yeah, and I love the combination of that because we've seen some of that where money is inherited and then it's gone quickly. And I've actually seen the other end of that spectrum too, where there's a little bit of frustration that it all went into that third bucket and it's kind of tightly bound by the description of the trust. And now we can't take any more out than X number of dollars or X percentage per year. And if we would have had maybe a more of that bucket strategy, it probably would have been a little bit better approach. But
You know,
part
I
of
never
what
go ahead.
I'm hearing when I hear that too is I'm thinking, okay, as a listener listening to this and saying, hey, Eddie, that all sounds great, but also it's starting to sound a little bit more complex than the simple will, I love you, will kind of thing that I have right now. So or is that just where you hire professionals to make sure it's done right? Because um, how complex does that end up being?
Well, it is more complex than a simple will, but a simple will is not going to achieve your goals, probably.
Right. If we're after the right results, we have to live with a little bit more complexity.
There you are. And it also depends on what your goals and objectives are. For example, I just did a, a huge estate. And I mean, when I say huge, I mean a huge estate where there's no tax consequences. We're talking now billions, but it's all going to charity. Well, you know how simple that one is. There's no tax planning. It's all going to go out right to them. So every estate, I know this sounds hokey and that people don't believe this, but every estate plan we do is custom crafted. We usually meet with planning clients somewhere between 5 and 8 times, usually over about a 9 or 10 month period. We used to meet every other week. We found that actually we have a better result if we meet with them once a month. It gives them some gestation time to think things through.
Sure.
And so our process, there's nothing fast about our process,
Okay.
but it's thorough and they're going to be well educated. And then they can sit down with the attorney and the attorney says, why do you want these two buckets over here? They can say, well, here's why. And
Right.
we want them to go into those meetings as consumers. Now, second part of what we do is after documents are drafted, we sit down with the planning client and go over the documents with them. The vast majority of people can't read legal documents. And,
Mm,
and
right.
they're hoping that what they want is in that document, described in that document. We're going to make sure that it is.
Right. Yeah, I've seen that trying to when clients get us their legal docs and we're looking at it. And even me, my own personality, I'm a visual learner. I want to see it like in the buckets type of visual like you talked about versus read all this legal language is a
Oh,
little bit
yeah.
more challenging.
That's one of the challenges in what we do too, is we think the best way to communicate what we're suggesting is by flowcharts. Now
Mm,
we include the narrative, and we do include an Excel spreadsheet as two other ways to see it. But the truth of the vast majority of us are not going to read legally binding documents. I mean, it's better than melatonin. If you
sure.
start reading those documents, you'll fall asleep.
Right. Right. Um, a couple of real specific questions, perhaps, of like, I think there's sometimes some confusion. I don't know if you can add any insight to this of kind of what you were talking about earlier. One of the mistakes people create a trust and then it's empty and they just die with this legal shell that didn't do anything. Um, so you kind of need to either have the trust own something or the trust be the beneficiary of something, right?
Correct.
And is there a good rule of thumb? Maybe I can't really ask this because it's too personal of a question based on each situation, but of when to title the account in the trust name versus use the trust as the beneficiary?
It's like a belt or suspenders.
Okay.
Okay. That may not be a great analogy, by the way.
No, I like the analogies.
Yeah. Or six and one, half dozen the other. Whatever you do, be thorough with it. Now, the advantage of going ahead funding it within the trust is that you know it's done.
Okay.
So I go back to one of our goals is to probate in advance, and that would be probating in advance.
Okay.
So, if you can bring in your retirement account, your investment accounts, and then create that testamentary to a revocable living trust where Cheryl and I live within this trust, but when we die, it continues with our children and
Hmm.
our grandchildren. It just makes everything flow faster.
Okay. One of the other kind of specific questions that came up was about a lot of times similar to what you were mentioning earlier, grandparents, and they look at their children and the children are doing great. So they think, okay, if I want to help someone in the family, it's going to be the grandkids. They tend to, they haven't messed up enough in their lives, so they still have the apple of the grandparents' eye. Um, but if we just give money directly, we can run into some generational skipping tax that can really whack the portfolio at 40%, right? So how do we
Yeah.
go about that?
Well, first of all, you have an estate and gift tax credit of $15 million. So anything over the annual credit, you can file a 709. So you can
Mhm.
use part of that 15 million. So I could give, instead of 19 million away next year, I could do 20. But for
Mhm.
1,000 of that, I'd have to file a gift tax return, a 709.
Right.
So we really are unlimited. But I'll tell you, we're seeing more and more people who are giving less and less to grandchildren too.
Okay.
For example, you don't know what they're going to be like, or maybe you do know what they're going to be like, and that gives you pause. And then at the same time, we want to treat them all the same. Well, you may have one grandchild who's struggling with addiction. You may have one who's going to become a rocket scientist. And how do you treat them equal when their situations in life are very different? So I think more and more parents are picking not to give to their grandchildren. We don't see nearly as many generations skipping trust as we used to.
Okay.
They're still out there, but they tend to be older.
Okay.
And I think what's happened is that more and more people are becoming more and more thoughtful. They're
Interesting.
really thinking this through. And the last thing they want to do is create a trust baby
Yeah.
where the child does nothing
Yeah.
or does very little at best. And I think, and this is especially true in the Midwest and South, especially true in the Midwest and South. They want their
Mm-hmm.
children to work.
Mm-hmm.
They want their children to struggle. I had 5 degrees. I went to school forever, went to college 12 years. We were so poor. I drove a 1952 pickup truck with no floorboard to Vanderbilt. And I don't know if you know anything about Vanderbilt. There's a lot of rich kids going to Vanderbilt.
Okay.
But Cheryl and I struggled and struggled and struggled. But guess what? We learned how to build wealth through that struggle.
Yeah.
And secondly, and maybe more importantly, there have been times I've gotten in my car or Cheryl and I've gone to dinner or something, and we looked at each other and said, we have done it. The sense of achievement. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to rob my children of that by giving them money.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. And I guess you're right that some of that is less of an issue these days as far as like the estate tax exemption. Who knows what direction that could eventually end up, but we can give a lot more without worrying about the estate tax coming into play.
Now you
Um,
do have, now Iowa just did away with the inheritance tax.
mhm.
As long as as long as you went up or
Right,
came
because we
down.
have the estate tax federal, and then individually each state we have to accommodate for too.
Yeah, Iowa's just done a great job because it used to be as long as you went up or down, there was no inheritance tax. If you went horizontally to siblings or nieces or nephews, which a lot of people don't have children, have nieces and nephews, there was a tax. They've done away with that in Iowa,
Hmm.
which is a really good thing.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. Um, you've, I think you've already shared a fair amount of this, just of what you've talked about. But if someone were to work with you, maybe we can go a little deeper into what that process looks like. It sounds like there's several meetings. It's not just a one-time meet and greet, and then we're giving you the advice of how to create the legal documents. What
Yeah.
does that process look like?
So we begin by giving, if it's a couple, husband and wife, a questionnaire. The questionnaire is not about who's getting a microwave or crock pot. This is more about what's your philosophy? What do you think? What do you believe? We ask them to fill it out independently of each other. When both have finished, we're going to ask them to read each other's.
Oh,
Once
interesting.
we get that back, we draft what's called a statement of values and objectives. It's an assimilating document that brings the two perspectives together. And it's pretty primitive. She said, he said, they said, she believes, he believes, they believe, she feels, he feels, they feel. Then we get
Okay.
a concern assessment where we look at 32 issues that are not always surfaced in the estate planning discussion. Good example is that For 4.5 years, I paid 12,500 every month for my mom in memory care unit.
Mm,
And so I had a contingent trust in my estate plan. If I predeceased my mom, some money was set aside to take care of my mother. Well, there's a lot of different applications for a contingent trust. And so we're looking that 37 things we're poking our nose into are
right.
potential issues that are most often overlooked in estate planning with attorneys. Then we get a net worth statement. That's usually meeting two. In meeting two, we also give them grist to work with where they write letters to their children. Do you have children?
Oh, interesting. No, we do not. We have three little dogs running around the house, but no
Well,
children at this
you
time.
could do this for your dogs. I don't think they could read it, but they may be super intelligent. But what we do is we ask them to write a letter to each of their children in their handwriting. When they finish the letter, fold it, put it in an envelope, put it away with your most important papers. It'll be the last communication with your children. It's a love letter.
That's a really
And
cool idea.
yeah, because if you've ever found something from someone's deceased, your parents or your grandparents, in their handwriting, it is incredibly powerful. But so we're looking not only at moving assets, but how to make a lasting impact for the good in your family.
Hmm.
Because what's most important to most of us are family,
Right.
and it's not money. And I want especially my two sons were a handful, and most of our conversations tended towards the what in the world were you thinking kind of approach. But I want them to know that I'm incredibly proud to be their father
Yeah.
and that I love them and I want for them to make good decisions. For example, always hire a plumber, don't do it yourself. That type of information
That's
in
good
there.
advice.
Yeah.
Well, when
So
you really have the legal documents buttoned up too, I think it leaves a lot less room for people arguing about the ambiguity in spots, right?
yeah, we're going to win that one. We're,
Yeah.
we're going to we're going to make sure that if someone wants to challenge it, they're going to meet with an attorney, and the attorney says, that's going to go nowhere. If you want to pay me, I'll do some research, but
Yeah.
you're not going to. That's why probating in advance is so important. Now, not technically probating, but getting everything
Yeah.
lined up where it can't be contested is incredibly wise. If and it usually doesn't. Family fights don't usually start with the heirs. It
Okay.
almost starts with the in-laws,
Yeah,
the
I could see that.
son-in-law, and the son-in-law say, "Why did your dad or why did your mom?" We
Yeah.
want to nip that in the bud before it ever becomes an issue.
Yeah. I wonder what the statistic would be when you mentioned, I think, was it 92% of inherited wealth is gone within 6 months? I wonder what that would be for what that percentage would go down to for clients that go through your process, because I think um, what you're describing talks about not just where do the assets go and how do we most efficiently and effectively transfer them, but what kind of values do we want to pass along, and almost treating that like an asset too. Like, because someone who inherits great values, that's a wealth that they can't spend through.
Yeah, I told my children that I was going to give them a good education. I don't make it available at least, a good education. I'm going to teach them how to work hard and how to have integrity.
Yeah.
And if they can't make it with that, they can't make it with wealth
Yeah.
because it's really hard to take someone who doesn't practice intelligent decision making to leave them wealth and for them to make it grow.
Right.
It tends to lower it. And so, I want children who have integrity and who have initiative. And, I have this formula in my mind that if you have knowledge plus experience, you don't need a lot of talent.
Mm,
You can be incredibly talented, but not know a lot and not have a lot of experience and get into trouble. But the more knowledge you have, the more experience. And so another reason we like these long-term trusts after mom and dad are gone, your client's heirs can work with you and you can help educate them
Right.
rather than just dumping money. And my other theory is
Good
too
point.
that once you spend money, it can never work for you. It's
Right.
gone, it's out the door. And
Right.
whatever you bought is going to age and
Yeah.
someday be in a yard sale. And so let's think through about the wisest way to manage the assets that are in our hands. And most of us can't do it on our own. We need some third party out there. And so another reason parents set up these trusts is because they want some advisors engaged. And they
Sure.
can't spend 92% of inheritance if it's tied up in a trust for the next 20 to 30 years.
Yeah. Fair point.
So it's going to be
That's a
there.
really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, as we kind of start to wrap up here, is there anything that I did not ask you that would be really relevant, or anything that you were hoping to share that we didn't get around to?
No, I'll tell you what is unique about Iowa. Of all the states we work in, Iowa's the most generous.
Oh, interesting.
And I know why. It took me years to figure this out. So if you're in Johnson County, outside of the suburbs, and a neighbor who is a farmer gets sick during planting season or harvest season, what do the other farmers do?
Yeah, they pick it up and step in.
Even if they don't know him personally.
Mm-hmm.
In Iowa, the farming industry has kept a lot of small communities functioning. They're
Yeah.
dwindling, size of
Yeah.
population dwindling, but there's still a sense of community. Try to get a hotel room in Des Moines when it's a state wrestling tournament or a girls' basketball tournament,
Yeah.
or God forbid, the state fair.
Yep.
There's still families in Iowa are really engaged with their families.
Yeah.
And so they tend to be more deliberate, more thoughtful than a lot of other states. Uh, and there's so many strategies where people could redirect money that would go to the IRS and redirect it to charity with benefit to their family. So what if you
Sure.
get that money aside and you take your retirement accounts, which have a heavy tax burden, right?
Right.
These qualified dollars are going to be taxed at the state and federal level. And if you give it to your heirs, they got 10 years to stretch. But I've been doing this almost 50 years. I've never seen anybody elect to stretch if they get
Mm.
an inheritance. They just give me the money.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you have, I haven't. But if I put it in a charitable remainder trust and give them income each year for 20 years, that's going to help secure their future. And
Right.
it's protected from any kind of litigation, right? So you can take money that would normally go to the IRS, set it in a pool, provide income to heirs, have growth and appreciation in a tax-free environment, just like a retirement account, right? We love retirement accounts because you got compounding interest, tax-free environment. Charitable trust feels exactly the same, technically
Yep.
very different, but it's going to stretch out that income over 20 years. And
Mm.
so at the end of that 20 years, that money's got to go to charity. But whenever you give to charity, what do you also get? A charitable deduction. So this is a technique that has been used by the very wealthy forever, but the average person never thinks about it because it's not taught in law school and it's not taught as part of CFP or whatever. It may be, there may be a glancing blow towards it,
Right.
but that's a strategy we see for a lot of people who aren't incredibly wealthy, but have a lot of money in retirement accounts.
Yeah.
And guess who gets to manage invest that money for 20 years?
Yeah. The advisors. Yeah.
Yeah. So you see why advisors love us. They
So
keep us.
you're Yeah, for sure. And you're really doing all the plan. I love the idea because like our firm, we do a lot of tax planning, but at least at this point, we don't do the actual tax prep because it's become a little bit of a commodity. And I don't know if you could quite say that about your industry with legal documents, but is it maybe a little bit in par with that where uh, the you someone might go into an attorney and the attorney say, okay, what do you want to document? I want this, this, and this, and the attorney drafts it up. But if they haven't had those valuable conversations with someone like your firm, then the legal docs maybe they don't mean a whole lot, or they're maybe directionally, not going to accomplish what they wanted.
There are at least going to be gaps, right?
Yeah.
But there is missed opportunity.
Yeah.
I think that,
90% is shocking when you told me that
yeah, well,
of,
I don't want to blame the attorneys. I mean, we got a bunch of them on staff,
yeah.
but it's that we go in and we don't like the billable hour. And so we want to be fast.
Yeah.
And so we answer questions with a little bit of information, but not thorough. Again,
Sure.
we want our people to go in and say, this is what we want to do, and here's why we want to do it. Go in as a consumer. And you know what? The benefit is not only the planning clients, but the attorney too.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to lay out, here's exactly what we're recommending they do. And a
Mm-hmm.
style and a format they fully understand.
Mm-hmm. And maybe even perhaps protects the attorney a little bit from litigious attempts at the next generation of saying, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Those
Yeah,
conversations,
at
perhaps.
least, a lot of attorneys get, not a lot, some attorneys get, uh, what's the word I want to use? I want to be judicious here. A lot of attorneys are blamed for their planning client's decision.
Mm-hmm.
We hear for especially generation skipping trust, where they recommended a generation skipping trust because that's what the parents wanted.
Yeah.
And now they've got it's so tied up, they can't do what, or maybe the document wasn't quite right.
Yeah.
And to me, it's unfair what we do to estate planning attorney. It'd be like a
Sure.
client coming into you and only telling you some of the information. You can't
Right.
make a good decision if you're not thorough.
Right. Yeah, I liken it a little bit to that comparison that I used with the tax prep where they come in, file what you give the CPA, and then later you can say, well, why didn't you tell me about this tax savings opportunity? It's like, well, I filed what you gave me.
Exactly right. So is that your
Yeah.
fault? No.
Yeah.
You did what the best with what you had.
Right.
We just want our people to be really well educated.
Right. Well, as we wrap up, your guys' process reminded me of a quick story I'm going to share about how you're asking questions of trying to get kind of the value passed on to the next generation. So years and years ago, I read this article. I think it was titled "Interview Your Loved Ones Before They Pass," something along those lines, and I actually, back in 2016, I actually had a conversation with my grandma, and I just hit record. It was on my iPhone, and I just asked all these questions and just let her talk. And it was a lot of fun to have the conversations because how often are you asking your parents or grandparents a lot of these, questions about their childhood and whatnot? And she passed away this past year. And then I was looking through my phone and I happened to find that interview and it was over an hour long. We talked a long time. And believe it or not, it happened to be the date that I interviewed her was to the day 10 years prior on that exact same day that she passed away. So
Wow.
um,
What a
just
gift.
kind of wild how those the world can line those things up for you. But yeah, you're right. What a gift to have. And I think people who go through this type of process that you've discussed can leave such an enormous gift in many ways to their kids and next generation too. But
We love what we do.
yeah, I can see why you said you don't have any plans to retire.
Most people I'm working with are my age or older, and I relate to them.
Yep.
I'm asking the same questions they're asking.
Yep.
So I have
Yeah,
really enjoyed our time together. Your clients are fortunate to have you. I see from what I've heard from others that you have great integrity. And to me, that is the most important ingredient for any professional to
for
have
sure.
integrity. And you do. Your clients are fortunate to have you.
Well, I appreciate that, Eddie, and I appreciate your time today and you sharing your expertise. And for all of our listeners, you can go to Integrity Guidance, the podcast tab, to find any of our past episodes. And we'll get this one posted soon. But Eddie, once again, very grateful you were able to spend this time today with us. And thanks so much for sharing your expertise.
Happy to do it.
Thank you for listening in and supporting this show. And if you have a moment, we'd love a 5-star review to help this podcast reach even more listeners. Also, this show thrives on feedback from its audience. So if you have any topics you'd like to hear covered or have anyone specific you'd like to see join the show, please email your recommendations to our address, hello@integrityguidance.com. That's hello@integrityguidance.com. We review every email that comes in, and we will do our best to include any recommendations you have for us. Thanks again, and be sure to follow our show so you don't miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not intended as specific tax, legal, or investment advice. Loren Sherman is a certified financial planner and owner of Integrity Wealth Management, a flat-fee firm which serves pre-retirees and retirees in search of their own work optional lifestyle.